Dr. Steven is quite possibly my favourite creator in the SRB2 modding scene. He was the very first creator featured on this channel when I released a video on his Mamie mod just over 4 years ago, and his other mods, though Werehog and Bandages being chief among them, were some of my most popular videos back in the dark days before I got myself a mic and pulled myself out of the content farm mines. I don't think I've really given him the spotlight he deserves though, because I haven't really looked in on his work in years. Kiryu's great, but I reviewed him way back in 2022, and the Delta Cars pack is possibly one of the densest character packs out there, to the extent that I was too intimidated by the mod breadth to actually cover it on the channel. Although one of his mods, the Egg Pack, was the focus of one of my most recent mod reviews, it's unfortunately an outlier in regards to quality, as it's maybe his only mod that I don't really like. The fact that the only work of his that I've covered somewhat recently is the only one that I think is anything below great is a shame, and I don't want the rest of his efforts to be indicted as a result. Luckily, between this and the fact that I've recently joined the official SRB2 Discord server, my memory has been jogged of a character whose time to shine has been long belated. Now if only I knew how to say his name. I'm only kidding. I asked Dr. Steven about this before I started recording this video, so I can say, with all the respect he deserves, that Ko was a fantastic addition to the Steph Cars pack, and he easily sits alongside Skip and Jaina to form Dr. Steven's magnum opus. There are a few quirks to his moveset that I'm still grappling with, but Ko's charisma and excellence in most everything makes the Sassy Wolf an instant classic. Every member of the Steph Cars trio can trace their gameplay loop to a different area of inspiration. Skip was effectively a persona of Hat Girl, and having played a Hat in time since making my review of him, it's interesting to see just how blatantly the movement of that game was copied to make a character that, although fun, takes some getting used to. Jaina is, to my knowledge at least, a more indirect ode to the Mega Man Zero games, with her speed and agility messing perfectly with abilities that double as potent attacks. Ko is possibly the most divorced of his inspiration of the three, because while I've had comments claiming that he's based on Peppino from Pizza Tower, or Wario from Wario Land, his mod page description places fighting game grapplers as his primary inspiration. While the gameplay similarities are obviously not exactly analogous, you can certainly feel quite a bit of the DNA of a Zangief or a Potemkin in Ko. He is a brute, and trades in finesse and elegance for heavy punches and dives that just get the job done. You have two abilities at your disposal, both of which function as both attack and movement tool. The Wolf Strike is a forward punch, while the Wolf Missile is a downward slam. Both are chargeable, causing their potency to be increased as their respective button is held down. I'll start with Wolf Strike because it's the ability you're going to see in full the most often, and that's because you're going to be using it for everything. Need to accelerate quickly? You'll be charging up a Wolf Strike. Need to attack an enemy? You'll be charging up a Wolf Strike. Need to attach to a wall? You'll be charging up a Wolf Strike. It's solid for all of these purposes. As I made my way through SRB2's vanilla campaign and a fair number of old OLDC levels, I found that I was using this constantly, while the Wolf Missile was relegated to a supporting role at best. You see, the Wolf Missile is not a standard straight down to the ground pound, as exemplified by characters like Mighty. No, it's instead a diagonal one, which are the worst kind of this genre of ability. As much as none of the vanilla characters have one as part of their moveset, SRB2 is pretty accommodating of the basic ground pound, most likely because of the elemental shield that temporarily grants you one, giving you plenty of places to use one to your advantage. But these usually take the form of drops through tight pits, so ground pounds fix you an angular trajectory, especially angles as extreme as Ko's Wolf Missile has, make it both very difficult to actually aim into the small pit, but also to drop smoothly down it without scraping against a wall awkwardly. It's also no good for attacking things because as much as charging it grants it an area of effect when you land, you'll probably be so far away from your target that you'll miss anyway. As a result, the Wolf Missile merely becomes an assist that helps combo Wolf Strikes together, because you can effectively eke out an additional mid-air strike by cancelling out of this before you drop, nearly doubling the ground you can cover. Besides, if you did want to use it to get to the ground faster, it's basically redundant, because Ko's immense heft means he falls faster and releases a shockwave upon impact if he drops from high enough. The strategy then is to charge a Wolf Missile, cancel it, use a Wolf Strike to attach to a wall, climb up it, then drop down to release a big shockwave and repeat the process all over again. There's only a single character that I can recall having a game plan anything like this, and that's Mighty. Seeing how I despise that guy, it should be taken as high praise that I think Ko is really fun to play as despite being conceptually fairly similar. I think that's because of Ko's improved horizontal capabilities, as well as the fact that there's a possibility of saving yourself if you mess up. I'm not very good at SRB2 despite all the time I sunk into it, so it frustrated me that if I made a mistake playing as Mighty, I had no chance to remedy it before I fell into a pit or whatever. As Ko, however, I still have my Wolf Strikes, and I can therefore still grapple to a wall. This creates a far more varied gameplay experience, as I can always be going up, down, sideways or backwards as Ko, whereas Mighty could only ever very slowly go up, or almost instantaneously, practically uncontrollably, go down. Returning to the Wolf Strike for a moment, there's an additional wrinkle to it for those with a decent sense of timing. Anyone who knows anything about the Yakuza series will almost certainly know about the infamous Tiger Drop, where Kiryu can mysteriously parry just about everything just by dropping to his knee. It's martial arts, I've seen people pull crazier things in the real world, and it's far from the strangest thing in that franchise. Anyway, by sheer coincidence, Ko has a very similar ability which, again, purely coincidentally, says a very similar name. The Titan Drop. This allows you to parry basically everything, from enemy attacks to level hazards, and all you need to do is press spin within a pretty generous window. You will end up doing it accidentally several times. It's a pretty fun ability, and one that is very rare in the SRB2 world, really adding in an extra wrinkle to Ko's moveset when he's fighting enemies or even just navigating the level. Unfortunately, it has been held back from reaching its true potential, and that's because of the first of two minor gripes I have with Ko. Similar abilities to the Titan Drop exist in all sorts of games, and there are a few characteristics that they tend to share. They usually negate the parried attack and its effects. They offer some sort of protection through a disrupting shockwave or good old invincibility frames. They often allow for a counter-attack against the parried foe, whether that be automatic or through a manual input, and where appropriate, they sometimes reflect projectiles. The Titan Drop definitely has two of these characteristics, reflecting projectiles and releasing a damaging shockwave, and it attempts the other two, but it doesn't do a great job at them. I believe the ability works by negating the damage value of the attack that it parries, but that means that it isn't very good at actually protecting you, because it leaves you very open to danger afterwards. A lack of invincibility frames means that in any situation where you could potentially take damage after the initial hit, such as when Black Eggman's missiles release fire when they hit a surface, the Titan Drop is made practically useless, because while you'll avoid taking damage from the missile, you'll just take it from the flames instead. I found plenty of circumstances where I take damage from an enemy I Titan dropped, because they'd managed to hit me before the game registered they'd been destroyed, and it means it isn't as effective at avoiding damage from level gimmicks as I think Dr. Steven wants you to believe. I don't think it's too big of a change to say that a few seconds of invincibility frames, perhaps about equivalent to the amount given after taking damage, would make the Titan Drop a lot more consistent as a defensive tool, and really allow it to live up to the legendary reputation of the Tiger Drop that it just happens to be very similar to. The second flaw within Ko's moveset is the way the Wolf Strike handles homing onto objects. Much like any standard homing attack derivative, the Wolf Strike will automatically lock onto enemies and monitors if performed within a certain range of them, but I'd almost rather it didn't do this. The biggest reason for why I think that is because it gives no indication that it is locked onto something, so there have been many more moments than I care to count where I've manoeuvred myself to break through a wall or fire myself across a gap, only to be unceremoniously yanked off screen to hit a monitor that I had every intention of ignoring for the sake of time. Without any sort of UI element to mark a targeted object, the range at which this homing effect occurs feels extremely inconsistent, as there have been times where I've attempted to hit an enemy standing right in front of me to no avail, and other times where Ko has attempted to break through the level geometry to hit something that I literally cannot see. With a lot of other characters, I'd say better signage as to when the homing effect had been activated would be best, but honestly, in this case, I'd almost rather the effect simply didn't occur. I don't think it adds much to Ko, and outside of boss fights, it's an inconvenience far more often than it is a helping hand. Let me start this section with what everyone in the comments is likely to be talking about. Ko's taunts. They're pretty good. You have a set of basic taunts available to you by pressing toss flag, and they help build up Ko's personality as a cocky and brash jock, with a lot of posing in a way that exaggerates his size and bulk. There are even two sets of these, with one set performed on the ground and another in the air, although these are unfortunately blocked if Ko enters the Wolf Missile state, regardless of whether or not you activated it yourself. Of course though, the real treat is with the set of rare taunts, which are triggered only very rarely as part of the basic taunt roulette. These are less personal to Ko, and instead of making him out to be some sort of cool macho man, reference famous poses or memes. Off the top of my head, I can remember the infamous Satsui no Hado, as well as a T-pose and some sort of fists. They're really fun to see, although I would like them to be just a little more common. As it currently stands, they appear in the roulette so rarely that you have to resort to spamming taunts, but this often leads to them appearing for a split second before being replaced by one of the more common ones. More generally, Ko represents the final archetype missing from the Steph Cars pack, the burly brawler. While Skip is round and cute and adorable, and Jaina is cool and slick and edgy, Ko is big and hard and teeming with muscle. If the grappler DNA is somewhat watered down throughout his moveset, it's being expressed in full force here, as their famously huge frames and dominating presence over the rest of their games as cast is perfectly represented by Ko being as big and imposing as he is. Even if it's the taunts that best exemplify his personality, I think Ko's basic movements still manage to endear him as cocky and rough around the edges, as he runs fairly upright and belly flops with gusto. He's clearly brimming with barely contained power, and you can almost see the muscles pop as he charges a wolf strike or lands after a long fall. There's even still room for a bit of goofiness, looking to how he collapses after defeat, or to how he looked to have the wind knocked out of him after taking damage. I criticised Eggpack for the boring sprites and especially for their super form, with its strange proportions giving it a very awkward appearance, but with years of improvement, experience and practice on his side, Dr. Steven has managed to create a character that fits a similar archetype far more successfully. You might then assume that such a powerful character will have an equally awe-inspiring super form, but I'm sorry to say that this was quite disappointing. Ko certainly has one, but unlike the Egg Pack, it doesn't make him look any different. In fact, even his colours are barely changed, which is never a good sign in my eyes. The standard suite of super abilities are present, and you can expect invincibility, increased speed, and higher jumps as always, but I noticed very little seems to have been changed with his base abilities. Considering that both the Wolf Strike and Wolf Missile requires charging to increase in power, you'd think Super Co would perhaps be able to circumvent this, or spam the abilities far more quickly, or even unlock a new higher level of power, but this is not the case. The charge times are still present, and in fact don't even appear to be any shorter. The shockwaves released by Co's attacks don't seem any bigger, nor do they seem to be any more damaging, even if that would only be relevant against bosses you shouldn't be able to face while using it. And the Titan drop is also seemingly unchanged. This is your basic super form through and through, as simple and forgettable as you can get. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it is disappointing to see for a character like this. I think the best way to summarize Co is to compare him to his grappler forefathers. When you think of the archetype big, muscly, macho man are what springs to mind, and Co certainly fits the bill. They're often lambasted by the wider fighting game community for being simplistic, which makes it difficult to accept that it took any effort on your opponent's behalf to beat you. That latter point isn't entirely relevant, but Co is on the simpler side of things, and he's pretty easy to pick up and play well. Oftentimes, a fighting game's grappler will be one of their most recognisable characters for their big personalities and fun designs. Co definitely falls in line there. And finally, a grappler, for as fun as they usually are, often ends up held back from greatness due to a myriad of small problems crippling their viability. Co is great, but he does have that set of small problems. Inconsistent homing on the wall strikes, inconsistent Titan drops, a boring super form. Where possible, I have mentioned improvements I think could resolve these, and while we're here, I'd like to add that I think the Wolf Missile could do with that homing effect. But don't think that they ruin Co. I think he might be an acquired taste, like grapplers often are, seeing as the SRB2 community seems to generally prefer faster and more complex characters. But I think Co may yet come to define his archetype, and he's very good at what he does. I've moved past giving numerical scores to my reviews, but consider Co, and the Stephcast pack as a whole, to have my seal of approval. I'd easily recommend him, Skip, and Jaina to anyone, any day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.